Welcome to Decoding Parenthood, where we unleash the secrets of parenting. Today, we have Dr. Arlene Gerson, who is a child psychologist, with us, helping us with screen time and its effects on children. We will be talking about different topics, different screen time fundamentals, and we will also be talking about how screen time is given by different families and how it affects our children. So welcome, Dr. Gerson, and we are happy to have you back.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So screen time, it's a very touchy subject because it varies from family to family. I have spoken. I have friends and myself too. When I was younger and I saw, other children with devices, I would always wonder. I was like, I'm never going to do that, or I'm never going to give screen time to my child. And then things change and life changes, and now you're on the same boat, and your child's doing screen time, which sometimes it could be beneficial, and we're going to talk about that too, how it can be beneficial, but it also could affect children, and we're going to talk about that too. So for you, according to you, what do you think? How does screen time affects children?
I think that depends on how screen time is used. But what we know from the research is that too much screen time or screen time that has poor quality programming is linked to a number of things like obesity or sleep problems, difficulties developing language and social skills, attention problems, behavior problems. So I'm talking mainly about young kids under the age of 5. But that is not to say that there aren't some benefits of media use as well, if it's used in particular ways.
How would I know how much screen time is appropriate? Yes, I could check online. I could maybe talk to a pediatrician, and I think everybody has a different philosophy about it. Some say 10 minutes a day, some could say 10 minutes a week. So how do we know? Do we have documentation on, this age group is this much time, or, does it go by that, or what do you follow?
I follow the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Okay.
I do that actually for many different things with regard to child rearing. But the American Academy of Pediatrics says that under 18 months, there should be really no screen time unless it's something like video chats, communication with people that are not in your immediate environment. And what they're saying is 18 to 24 months, you can have some screen time, but you want to be very careful of the content of the screen time. And you want to keep it to short intervals.
Okay.
So 15 to 20 minutes when you need to. And then over 24 months, American Academy of Pediatrics is saying no more than an hour.
An hour a day.
An hour a day.
Okay.
With the proviso that it is active rather than passive screen time.
Could you talk about that? Like, what is the difference between the active screen time versus passive screen time?
So active screen time is when a kid is engaging with the media that's put in front of them. And that can include parents that it's recommended for that reason that parents co-watch with kids.
Okay.
And they narrate what's going on, and they ask questions during the media, and then afterwards they go back and they sort of review the lessons.
Okay.
that are learned. So the lessons that are learned can be educational,
Mm-hmm.
reading, writing, math, or they can be social,
Okay.
um, being a friend, being honest,
Mm-hmm.
cooperating,
Mm-hmm.
being kind.
So if a parent is or a family is going out to dinner and they want to, enjoy dinner peacefully, and many times you see the child with an electronic device because that's how they're going to get that 30 minutes or the 40 minutes of just eating and not focusing on the child. What are your views on that? And if, you know, you don't agree with it, would you have another way of maybe entertaining that child instead of just giving the device?
Well, I think families need to establish rules for screen time use. It's never too late to establish rules. And we know with young kids and even older kids, they're used to having rules in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're used to, it's in particular at school, they're used to having those rules be um, enforced.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens sometimes in families when there are no um, rules about media is it just becomes a go-to for all sorts of different things. And what we know is that, for example, when there is an overuse of media in terms of giving kids a way out from socializing, that they don't really develop skills to, for example, talk with people at the dinner table or talk with family or friends when you get together. And so when you let this happen on a consistent basis, kids actually don't develop the social skills that they need in order to be able to converse and play and interact.
So as we're talking about screen time, we know that every family, every parent has their own ideas about screen time. What are your views on that?
I think that there's some research that can guide us in terms of our views as parents about screen time. So we know that too much or not high quality screen time media is unhealthy for kids
Mm-hmm.
in many different ways. And and so some parents have no rules about media or screen
Mm-hmm.
time. Whenever they feel like they want a break, they give their kids some media. Whenever their kids are upset, they give them media.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they're doing something that they don't want their kids to pay attention to, they give them media. So there's that group of parents. And there's a group of parents that have rules and limits, but they only follow them sometimes
When it's convenient for them.
where it's convenient for them. And then you have those parents that have the very clearly defined rules and expectations for when there's going to be media and when there's not going to be media. And so what we know about child behavior is that behavior that is consistently um, enforced is more likely to be durable. If there are rules and routines that are consistently followed, kids are going to more consistently follow them. If they're sometimes followed and sometimes not followed, kids are not going to follow them.
Because they're confused themselves.
They're confused themselves, and what they realize is that if they get loud enough, if they have a big enough tantrum, if they make a big enough fuss,
Hmm.
they're going to win at least some of the time. So they're going to continue to try to win, even when their parents are saying, now I'm going to put my foot down.
So, well, you bring up these three categories, and it's doesn't it also vary or depend on how the parents' day is going on?
Right. Of course. And so there are some times when a parent has to do things around the house, or a parent has to make phone calls,
Hmm.
or 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 fix dinner, or something like that, where they want their kids to be occupied. But then if you're gonna use it in that way, then it's best to establish a routine. So perhaps the routine in your house is uh, when we as parents prepare the meal, you can have some screen time.
Okay.
But then when the meal is finished, the screen time is over.
Hmm.
And if a kid knows that that's the rule, and they're gonna more like and that's the message that they get every single time, then they're gonna learn not to balk at it.
I also, I would like to add to that it's always good to also have some transitional time to that. So when you say, when the dinner is ready, you can have it, but then maybe give them a 5-minute timer. Like dinner is about to be done so they can be mentally ready when it's actually time to turn it off, because nobody likes that last minute warning. We adults don't, and the kids certainly don't, right? So they're in the middle, maybe of something, watching a video. They know that they just have 5 more minutes to go, and then they have to turn it off. But when you just say, I'm done cooking, turn it off, their brain kind of sometimes they might fight back to you. So having that transitional time is also important. And you could do that transitional time for every time you're having a transition. It could be, from TV to eating to bathing to sleeping. I think it, works great with older children. You could probably just say it 5 minutes. With the younger, they might want some visualization with a timer, or like a sand timer or something that they can see how much more time they have.
Yeah, I think giving kids a heads up that something that they prefer to do is going to
Mm-hmm.
come to an end is a really good strategy to help make that transition better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think also to, young kids don't necessarily know that 15 minutes is a lot less than 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can say 15 minutes, but then, when dinner is almost ready, you can say, just want to let you know, dinner's almost ready. And when dinner's ready, we're going to turn off the screens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another strategy as well for dinner, as opposed to just giving your kid screens.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is to have your kid participate in the preparation
That's a
mealtime.
great idea.
So one of the things I think that happens with screen time is it takes away the opportunity for doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
So for parents to be mindful about ways that they can include their kid in the activities of daily life
Mm-hmm.
will allow that kid to grow and learn in ways that are much more beneficial than just looking at a screen.
Right. I agree. I agree completely. It's even just like, setting up the table or giving those responsibilities makes them feel part of the family, and not just, sitting on the top. And those things you have to, like we had said previously, you have to start working on it slowly, and you have to work on it every single day. You cannot make a rule one day and do something else the week later or a day later, because kids thrive on consistencies. When COVID happened, um, the young kids who were supposed to start school. They ended up not going to school, and everybody was doing virtual learning on their computer for 8 hours a day. Now, 8 hours a day seems a lot because for me as an adult, it's difficult to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day and actually focus. I cannot even imagine what it was for a 6-year-old, right? What do you think? How did it affect on children?
The research is still out, but the research that's coming in is suggesting that the young kids that were forced to learn in an environment that wasn't um, interactive with somebody, um, d- oftentimes developed problems with attention and oftentimes developed problems with social skills, and even with language. So if we think about kids' development in school, we know that human to human interaction teaches them a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't have that with either their teachers or their peers.
Right.
And we know that in live school, there is there are moments of breaks for kids where
Mm-hmm.
they have um, an opportunity to sort of reset their system and prepare for the next subject. You don't necessarily have that during COVID. So there are kids that missed out on a lot
Right.
of really important things
Mm-hmm.
when they just had to sit in front of a computer screen. We noticed kids had eye problems. We noticed that some kids had more difficulty sleeping, going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
We noticed that younger kids did not develop language or emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
as readily as when they were when they had in-person learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it absolutely did have an effect. Now, parents were sort of by default needing to give their kids more screens and
Yeah.
more media.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do when that is not necessarily something that has to be done?
Mm-hmm.
You go back and you say, okay, our family is going to have some rules with media. And one of the rules is, when you don't have media. So dinner time, family time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, going out and seeing nature. We oftentimes see parents walking with their kids and talking on their phone or having their kids have a phone while they're in nature. So they're losing out on the ability to pay attention to the moment and to see what's around them.
Mm-hmm.
But even though there was some lost time with COVID, it's never too late.
Okay, so what can they do now to cope up from what happened just 2 years ago? Like let's say the child has social skills, lacking social skills because never left the house, was stuck in the home for a year and a half. How do you cope up from what developmental delay you have from that 1.5 years?
So in most cases, that is a temporary phenomenon.
Okay.
And kids can catch up. And there's some things that parents can do to help kids catch up. One is to set limits on screen time. And those limits even include things like no media an hour before bed. No media while there's homework going on. No media when there are friends over. And more than anything else, I think it's not necessarily the amount of media screen time, but it's the quality. And it's not necessarily the amount of media time, but it's like, what is the interaction around that media? So there's something, there's a phenomenon of co-watching
Okay.
So you sit with your kid and you watch the program that they're watching and you comment on what's going on
Mm-hmm.
and you ask questions
Mm-hmm.
and you make that a time where there are lessons that are learned
Mm-hmm.
that are highlighted by a parent's involvement.
But most of the media that's given to the children, it's given so that it buys time to the parent. If you see it in generalization, right? Like you're talking about, like you mentioned before, like you're watching something on the device while we're cooking, or the parent is cooking, right? So the parent is already engaged in some other activity. How is she going to watch something with the child? And it's like we want to make it more effective, but I feel like most of the media given to children is to buy time for the parents.
And that's a shift in a parent attitude, as opposed to just saying, you know, we've got this tool, let us use this tool rather than direct interaction with my child.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just give them this media. It's a shift the parents need to make. It's a belief that their interaction with their kid really is important
Mm-hmm.
and more important than having them go at it alone
Right.
with whatever content happens to be available. There's a really good resource that's not for profit that's been around for a long time called Common Sense Media,
Okay.
and it's a really good resource for parents to look at to help find uh, videos and apps that are of high quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so if parents can sort of curate what their kids watch and how much they watch it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the kids are going to be better off. And
Okay.
let me go back. It's a mindset. It's a
Mm-hmm.
mindset for parents to have that not all media is bad,
Right.
um, but it needs to be used in limited ways. We know that benefit, young kids benefit much more from free play
Mm-hmm.
and music and exercise and activities outside than they do for video. And
Mm-hmm.
so if this is the only way that your kid is going to learn or be entertained,
Mm-hmm.
your kid is having a limited amount of exposure to other things that are going to give them the skills that they need in order to interact with their peers and the world around them.
That's correct. So as we're talking about technology and screen time, now, young children are looking for smartwatches or, those athletic devices. Um, what are your views on that? Do you think parents are okay to give it to them, or what age would you recommend that, smartwatches are okay for children? And are they beneficial or they don't do anything?
Well, we know that it's important for kids to have a balance in their activities, and exercise and activity is a really important element
Mm-hmm.
of a child's well being.
Mm-hmm.
So, wearable devices that monitor activity, are tools that parents can use to observe their kids' activity level. And in fact, kids of school age can use to compete
Yeah.
to get more activity.
Mm-hmm.
Parents need to lead by example. So, what works best is if a parent is aware of the number of steps they take
Mm-hmm.
or the number of minutes they run around.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are going to become interested in tracking that as well.
Okay.
What I would avoid
Mm-hmm.
is a wearable device that is so complicated that it can be reset or not work or be distracting.
Right.
So, for example, young kids
Mm-hmm.
would do better with a device that just monitors activity as opposed to a device that monitors uh, activity and heart rate.
And they do
Watch.
FaceTiming and yeah. Yep. So we have been talking about screen time and technology and its negative aspects on, overusage or what's equivalent to what age group. But we know that there are advantages to technology. And we have seen that over years. So what are the tools and skills like that, we can use to make technology to our advantage?
I think we do have skills and we do have tools at our disposal. And it's important to be aware of the ways that technology and screens and media can benefit kids. And one of the things that we know is that learning can be optimized, can be encouraged with certain kinds of devices and screen time. We know, for example, that teaching kids letters and numbers and reading and math and even social skills can all be um, helped with the right amount at the right time. So we want parents to be consumers of media. We want for them to, if at all possible, to pre-screen movies that their kids are going to watch, to check out apps that their kids are going to use to make sure that they're not just passive learning but active learning. We want to make sure that kids realize that learning can be fun, and so to sort of put these opportunities in front of them and get excited with them about these kinds of things.
I also would like to add to that is that it helps with um, hand eyes coordination. You know,
I
it
agree.
also helps with fine motor skills and like your typing things. But I think there are apps like Miss Dr. Gerson said that you have to find the right apps and the right technology that can be advantageous to your child and not just, put a cartoon show every single time. And I think there has to be a balance of everything for it to be perfect. So, what do you think? How much screen time is too much?
I think there are several things that you can look for, in a sense, red flags that you can look for to be able to tell that your child is having too much screen time. And one of the red flags is if they tantrum when screens go off, that suggests that they are not necessarily able to do something other than screen time to be entertained. I think the other thing is that if kids consistently would prefer screens to people, that's a red flag as well.
So, you know, a child is watching something on the iPad and the parent says, it's time to move on, it's dinner time, and the child throws a tantrum. What should be the next step?
Well, I think it's really important to validate that a child is upset or angry or disappointed, and they have to move from screens, from media to something that's less preferred. But then I think after the validation occurs, I think it's important for parents to go back and to restate the rule.
Right. So, based on everything that we have spoken about this topic, there are a couple of things that, we would like to reiterate and it's one of those important thing is that it's important to keep the devices or the TVs or whatever media you have out of the kids' bedroom. They shouldn't be in their calming spaces. Um, it's also important to not keep the TV on and, just eliminate the background TV as much as possible. It's also important to know that kids gravitate to what is available and what is entertaining to them. So when we give choices to kids and technology is one of the choices, they're going to gravitate to that because that is entertaining. But when we take the technology away and when we give them hands-on toys or books, it does help them in the long run because that is what they find more entertaining. So it's important to give the right tools to your children as they're growing up. And yes, screen time can help, but then it might sometimes overtake the other types of learning. And the most important thing is consistency. So whatever rules you make in your household, everybody has to be on board and everybody has to follow the same rules. So, if you're doing family style dining, the phone's away, everybody is on the table, having a conversation, being engaged. That's important. We as adults tend to do so much work, even, on our phones and all the time. And we have to set the examples, right? For our
Absolutely.
for our children. But we are on the phones and texting or emailing. They would think that that's okay. So we definitely want to make sure, we're setting the right example. We are being the right role model for our children. It was, this topic is full of, nuggets that we can take and implement in our lives to make, a more sociable environment for our children. And we would like to thank Dr. Gerson for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to have her. And thank you for being a part of Decoding Parenthood. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.